Hello, folks, and thank you for choosing to spend some time with me today. We are back with another spooky story. We are returning to the author, Edith Nesbit. I have read one of her stories before, so you can always find that other video where I talk a little bit more about her. So, classic writer, classic short story. Oh my goodness, do I ever look shiny today? Someday, maybe we'll be able to afford to upgrade to a better camera. But until that day, enjoy how shiny I look. Well, we'll say it was intentional. Sure, why not? So this is another Victorian or Edwardian? Oh my goodness. Let me see if I have that information available. 1890s. Okay, or at least the copy that I'm reading from, which would make it Victorian. Sorry for the delay, just trying to get myself situated here. So, yes, John Charrington's wedding. It's kind of a shorter one, but hey, it'll be good to get us back into the whole short story thing, which, if you've watched my previous video, which was an unboxing, you know that I have had COVID recently and I'm still kind of tired. So, a shorter one was just sort of the best way to go today. And before we get started with our tale of terror, just the usual reminder that these stories, being Victorian, as in this case, sometimes also Edwardian, they do sometimes contain statements, references to ideas about race, gender, ethnicity, religion, orientation that are quite rightly distasteful to modern people. But I don't believe in censoring that when I'm reading these stories because I don't think we should just pretend that those attitudes never existed. And as usual, I don't remember if there's any of that in particular in this story, but if that doesn't sound like something you're interested in, please feel free to not consume this content. And of course, the other warning is that spooky stories, by their nature, tend to contain things that are unpleasant, be it references to death in all its various incarnations, murders, suicides, just generally unpleasant things that are known to happen to people in these stories. So, again, if that doesn't sound quite like your cup of tea, please feel free to watch another video instead of this one. Pardon me. Already thirsty. And with all of that out of the way, once again, thank you for choosing to spend some time with me. And let's get on with Edith Nesbit's. Oh my goodness. Well, that didn't take long, did it? I would also like to apologize in advance for all the misspeakings that I will inevitably do in these videos. I am by no means a professional voice actor or anything like that, as I'm sure you've probably guessed. But here we go. John Charrington's wedding. No one ever thought that May Forster would marry John Charrington, but he thought differently. And things which John Charrington intended had a queer way of coming to pass. He asked her to marry him before he went up to Oxford. She laughed and refused him. He asked her again next time he came home. Again she laughed, tossed her dainty blonde head, and again refused. A third time he asked her. She said it was becoming a confirmed bad habit and laughed at him more than ever. All right, dude, she doesn't want you. So I already not a fan of John here. Like, she's refused you several times. Respect her wishes, please. John was not the only man who wanted to marry her. She was the belle of our village, and we were all in love with her, more or less. It was a sort of fashion, like heliotrope ties or Inverness capes. Gross. Oh my God, could you imagine being this poor woman? Gross, where all the guys are like, if you've ever read The Princess Bride, which if you didn't know it was a book, definitely read the book, it's really, really good. But there's a point where Buttercup is sort of becoming of dateable slash marryable age. I think she's a teenager, an older teenager. And the boys in the village just like follow her around and bother her, and she hates it. And like all the other girls hate her because she's taken the boys away. And her line was like, well, why would anybody even want them? They're idiots. This is giving me Buttercup from the Princess Bride vibes. Therefore, we were as much annoyed as surprised when John Charrington walked into our little local club. We held it in a loft over a saddler's, I remember, and invited us all to his wedding. Well, you finally wore her down, you prick. Your wedding? You don't mean it. Who's the happy fair? When's it to be? John Charrington filled his pipe and lighted it before he replied. Then he said, I'm sorry to deprive you fellows of your only joke, but Miss Forster and I are to be married in September. You don't mean it. He's got the mitten again, and it's turned his head. No, I said, rising. I see it's true. Lend me a pistol, someone, or a first-class fare to the other end of nowhere. Charrington has bewitched the only pretty girl in our 20-mile radius. Was it mesmerism or a love potion, Jack? That's a healthy view of women. That's totally a healthy viewpoint. Absolutely. Neither, sir, but a gift you'll never have. Sorry, I'm very drying out already. Neither, sir, but a gift you'll never have. Perseverance. And the best luck a man ever had in this world. I'm not sure perseverance is really... When we're talking about dating and proposing and marrying, I'm not sure perseverance would necessarily go on the list of attributes to be admired. Respect your the object of your affection's wishes. Whatever genders, whatever is involved, whoever the two of you are, respect each other's wishes and boundaries, please. There was something in his voice that silenced me, and all chaff of other fellows failed to draw him further. He's probably blackmailing her or something. The queer thing about it was that when we congratulated Miss Forster, she blushed and smiled and dimpled, for all the world as though she were in love with him, and had been in love with him all the time. Upon my word, I think she had. Women are strange creatures. We're not. We're literally other humans. We are other people. We're not creatures. We're not some other race or species of being. Maybe she did love him all along. I don't know. Maybe it was a game between the two of them. Does not come off in a positive light, though. At least not all these years later. We were all asked to the wedding. In Brixham, everyone who was anybody knew everybody else who was anyone. My sisters were, I believe, truly, more interested in the trousseau, so the dress and household linens and stuff, than the bride herself. I mean, you've literally apparently all just insult them regularly by saying that May is the only good-looking one, so, maybe don't create a toxic environment and then get upset when the people that you've forced into that toxic environment behave in a way that is toxic. And I was to be best man. The coming marriage was much canvassed at afternoon tea tables and at our little club over the Saddlers, and the question was always asked, does she care for him? I don't know, maybe I'm just extra salty lately because of all the crap going on in the States, but I have very little patience for John and our narrator here. I used to ask that question myself in the early days of their engagement, but after a certain evening in August, I never asked it again. I was coming home from the club through the churchyard. Our church is on a thyme-grown hill, so thyme the herb, T-H-Y-M-E, not thyme as in T-I-M-E, and the turf about it is so thick and soft that one's footsteps are noiseless. I made no sound as I vaulted the low, lichened wall and threaded my way between the tombstones. It was at that same instant that I heard John Charrington's voice and saw her. May was sitting on a low, flat gravestone, her face turned towards the full splendor of the western sun. Its expression ended, at once and forever, any question of her love for him. It was transfigured to a beauty I should not have believed possible, even to that beautiful little face. John lay at her feet, and it was his voice that broke the stillness of the golden August evening. My dear, I believe I should come back from the dead if you wanted me." I coughed at once to indicate my presence, and passed on into the shadow fully enlightened. I mean, it's none of your business anyway, but okay. The wedding was to be early in September. 2 days before, I had to run up to town on business. The train was late, of course, for we are on the Southeastern, and as I stood grumbling with my watch in my hand, whom should I see but John Charrington and May Forster? They were walking up and down the unfrequented end of the platform, arm in arm, looking into each other's eyes, careless of the sympathetic interest of the porters. Of course, I knew better than to hesitate a moment before burying myself in the booking office, and it was not till the train drew up at the platform that I obtrusively passed the pair with my Gladstone, which is, if I recall correctly, is a text that used to be used for training lawyers. So, presumably he's in law school. And took the corner in a first-class smoking carriage. I did this with as good an air of not seeing them as I could assume. I pride myself on my discretion, but if John were traveling alone, I wanted his company. I had it. So I guess May was just seeing him off. Got lipstick on my finger. "Hello, old man," came his cheery voice as he swung his bag into my carriage. "Here's luck. I was expecting a dull journey." "Where are you off to?" I asked, discretion still bidding me turn my eyes away, though I saw without looking that hers were red-rimmed. "To old Bambridge's," he answered, shutting the door and leaning out for a last word with his sweetheart. "Oh, I wish you wouldn't go, John," she was saying in a low, earnest voice. "I feel something will happen." "Do you think I should let anything happen to keep me, and the day after tomorrow our wedding day?" "Don't go," she answered, with a pleading intensity which would have sent my Gladstone onto the platform and me after it. But she wasn't speaking to me. John Charrington was made differently. He rarely changed his opinions, never his resolutions. He only stroked the little ungloved hands that lay on the carriage door. "I must, May. The old boy's been awfully good to me, and now he's dying. I must go and see him, but I shall come home in time for—" The rest of the parting was lost in a whisper and in the rattling lurch of the starting train. "You're sure to come," she spoke as the train moved. "Nothing shall keep me," he answered, and we steamed out. After he had seen the last of the little figure on the platform, he leaned back in his corner and kept silent for a minute. When he spoke, it was to explain to me that his godfather, whose heir he was, lay dying at Peasmarsh Place, some 50 miles away, and had sent for John, and John had felt bound to go. Fair enough. That seems reasonable. A relative that's quite important to you is dying. I mean, the timing's bad, but shit happens, I guess. I shall be surely back tomorrow," he said, "or if not, the day after, in heaps of time. Thank heaven, one hasn't to get up in the middle of the night to get married nowadays." Isn't that the plot of one of those dumb movies where they all go to Vegas and then they can't find the guy that's supposed to be getting married? What movie is that? "And suppose Mr. Branbridge, oh, I've been saying Bambridge, it's Branbridge, my mistake. And suppose Mr. Branbridge dies. Alive or dead, I mean to be married on Thursday," John answered, lighting a cigar and unfolding the Times. At Peasmarsh Station we said goodbye, and he got out, and I saw him ride off. I went on to London, where I stayed the night. When I got home the next afternoon, a very wet one, by the way, my sister greeted me with, "Where's Mr. Charrington?" Goodness knows, I answered testily. Every man since Cain has resented that kind of question. Yeah, God forbid the women in your lives want to know where you are and that you're safe, especially if there's an important event coming up. Fuck them, I suppose. I thought you might have heard from him, she went on, as to you're to give him away tomorrow. Isn't he back? I asked, for I had confidently expected to find him at home. Yeah, it's like there was a reason she was asking, you dick. No, Geoffrey, my sister Fanny always had a way of jumping to conclusions, especially such conclusions as were least favorable to her fellow creatures. He has not returned, and what is more, you may depend upon it, he won't. You mark my words, there'll be no wedding tomorrow. My sister Fanny has a power of annoying me which no other human being possesses. You mark my words, I retorted with asperity. You had better giving up. Oh my gosh. COVID did a number on me. You had better give up making such a thundering idiot of yourself. There will be more wedding tomorrow than you'll ever take the first part in. A prophecy which, by the way, came true. I mean, screw you. At the moment, I like his sister more than I like him. But though I could snarl confidently to my sister, I did not feel so comfortable when, late that night, I, standing on the doorstep of John's house, heard that he had not returned. I went home gloomily through the rain. Next morning brought a brilliant blue sky, gold sun, and all such softness of air and beauty of cloud as to make up a perfect day. I woke with a vague feeling of having gone to bed anxious, and of being rather averse to facing that anxiety in the full light of wakefulness. But with my shaving water came a note from John, which relieved my mind, and sent me up to the Forsters with a light heart. May was in the garden. I saw her blue gown through the hollyhocks as the lodge gate swung to behind me, so I did not go up to the house, but turned aside down the turfed path. He's written to you too, she said without preliminary greeting when I reached her side. Yes, I'm to meet him at the station at 3 and come straight on to the church. Her face looked pale, but there was a brightness in her eyes and a tender quiver about the mouth that spoke of renewed happiness. Mr. Branbridge begged him to stay another night, and he had not the heart to refuse, she went on. He's so kind, but I wish he hadn't stayed. I was at the station at 2:30. I felt rather annoyed with John. It seemed sort of a slight to the beautiful girl who loved him, that he should come, as it were, out of breath, with the dust of travel upon him to take her hand, which some of us would have given the best years of our lives to take. But when the 3 o'clock train glided in and glided out again, having brought no passengers to our little station, I was more than annoyed. There was no other train for 35 minutes. I calculated that with much hurry we might just get to the church in time for the ceremony. But oh, what a fool to miss that first train! What other man could have done it? That 35 minutes seemed a year as I wandered round the station, reading the advertisements and the timetables and the company's bylaws, and getting more and more angry with John Charrington. This confidence in his own power of getting everything he wanted the minute he wanted it was leading him too far. I hate waiting. Everyone does, but I believe I hate it more than anyone else. The 3:35 was late, of course. I ground my pipe between my teeth and stamped with impatience as I watched the signals. Click. The signal went down. 5 minutes later, I flung myself into the little carriage that I had brought for John. Drive to the church, I said, as someone shut the door. Mr. Charrington hasn't come by this train. Anxiety now replaced anger. What had become of the man? Could he have taken suddenly ill? I had never known him have a day's illness in his life, and even so, he might have telegraphed. Some awful accident must have happened to him. The thought that he had played her false never, no, not for a moment, entered my head. Yes, something terrible had happened to him, and on me lay the task of telling his bride. I almost wished the carriage would upset and break my head so that someone else might have to tell her. Not I, who, but that's nothing to do with this story. It was 5 minutes to 4 as we drew up at the churchyard gate. A double row of eager onlookers lined the path from the Lychgate? Sure, Lychgate to porch. I sprang from the carriage and passed up between them. Our gardener had a good front place near the door. I stopped. "Are they waiting still, Biles?" I asked, simply to gain time, for of course I knew they were waiting by the crowd's attentive attitude. "Waiting, sir? No, no, sir. Why, it must be over by now." "Over? Then Mr. Charrington's come?" "To the minute, sir. Must have missed you somehow. And I say, sir," lowering his voice, "I never see Mr. John the least bit so afore. But my opinion, he's been drinking pretty free. His clothes was all dusty and his face like a sheet. I tell you, I didn't like the looks of him at all, and the folks insides are saying all sorts of things. You'll see something's gone very wrong with Mr. John, and he's tried liquor. He looked like a ghost." Foreshadowing. "And he went with his eyes straight before him, with never a look or word for none of us, him that was always such a gentleman." I had never heard Biles make so long a speech. The crowd in the churchyard were talking in whispers and getting ready rice and slippers to throw at the bride and bridegroom. The ringers were ready with their hands on the ropes to ring out the merry peal as the bride and bridegroom should come out. A murmur from the church announced them. Out they came. Biles was right. John Charrington did not look himself. There was dust on his coat. His hair was disarranged. He seemed to have been in some row, for there was a black mark above his eyebrow. He was deathly pale. But his pallor was not greater than that of the bride, who might have been carved in ivory. Dress, veil, orange blossoms, face, and all. Oh, Queen Victoria wore orange blossoms when she got married, in case anybody's interested. Apparently they smell really nice. As they passed out, the ringers stooped. There were 6 of them, and then, on the ears expecting the gay wedding peal, came the slow tolling of the passing bell. A thrill of horror at so foolish a jest from the ringers passed through all of us, but the ringers themselves dropped the ropes and fled like rabbits out into the sunlight. The bride shuddered, and gray shadows came out her mouth, but the bridegroom led her on down the path where the people stood with handfuls of rice. But the handfuls were never thrown, and the wedding bells never rang. In vain the ringers were urged to remedy their mistake. They protested with many whispered expletives that they would see themselves further first. In a hush like the hush of the chamber of death, the bridal pair passed into their carriage, and its doors slammed behind them. The tongues were loosed. A babble of anger, wonder, conjecture from all the guests and all the spectators. "If I'd seen his condition, sir," said old Forster to me as we drove off, "I would have stretched him out on the floor of the church, sir. By heaven I would, before I'd have let him marry my daughter." Then he put his head out of the window. "Drive like hell," he cried to the coachman. "Don't spare the horses." He was obeyed. We passed the bride's carriage. I forbore to look at it, and old Forster turned his head away and swore. We reached home before it. We stood in the hall doorway, in the blazing afternoon sun, and in about half a minute we heard wheels crunching the gravel. When the carriage stopped in front of the steps, old Forster and I ran down. "Good heaven, the carriage is empty, and yet—" I had the door open in a minute, and this is what I saw. No sign of John Charrington and of May, his wife, only a huddled heap of white satin lying half on the floor of the carriage and half on the seat. I drove straight here, sir," said the coachman, as the bride's father lifted her out, "and I'll swear no one got out of the carriage." We carried her into the house in her bridal dress and drew back her veil. I saw her face. Shall I ever forget it? White and drawn with agony and horror, bearing such a look of terror as I have never seen except in dreams. And her hair, her radiant blonde hair, I tell you it was as white as snow. As we stood, her father and I, half mad with the horror and mystery of it, a boy came up the avenue, a telegraph boy. They brought the orange envelope to me. I tore it open. Mr. Charrington was thrown from the dog cart on his way to the station at 1:30, killed on the spot. And he was married to May Forster in our parish church at 3:30, in presence of half the parish. I shall be married, dead or alive. What had passed in that carriage on the homeward drive? No one knows. No one will ever know. Oh, May, oh, my dear. Before a week was over, they laid her beside her husband in our little churchyard on the time-covered hill, the churchyard where they had kept their love trysts. Thus was accomplished John Charrington's wedding. And that is the end of the story. Definitely a creepy ghost story. But I will say, and again, maybe this is just because of what's been going on politically, but my main feeling about it is the audacity of men. The audacity of men to keep nagging at May until she agrees to marry him. The audacity of John to fucking die and think he gets to come back, marry May anyway, and then drag her onto death with him. Fuck you, John Charrington. You had no right to do any of those things. And I will say that, like, the till death do us part line, if this was like a real situation in like a horror movie or like a black comedy, I feel that the out would be that he was already dead when they were married, so it's an invalid marriage, which I think is how they solved the problem in Tim Burton's Corpse Bride, and I feel like it applies in this situation as well. But yeah, just the audacity of this man thinking that he's entitled to this woman even after death. And I know people, oh, but they were in love. He's dead. He is dead now. She is not dead. If you love her, you should want her to be happy. And if she's friggin' terror-stricken, I'm going to say she did not go gently into that good night, and John Charrington should go to hell and be ashamed of himself forever. And that is Edith Nesbit's... pardon me, John Charrington's wedding. I did not expect to get that worked up about it at the end there. And again, maybe it's just because of the politics that are going on right now, but something about that ending just really hit home for me. Yeah, just the audacity of this man. Don't like it. Do not care for it. Anyway, thank you for sticking around for another story and all my comments throughout. If you have an opinion, if there's a story that you would like me to read, feel free to pop it in the comments below. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, share the videos around so that other people also get to hear these cool stories that just aren't as popular anymore, which I think is a genuine shame. And I hope all of your loved ones and yourself are safe and well. And until we meet again, folks, bye.